Hi, I'm Brock Romanek, strategist for the DC office of Perkins Coie. This is the first video I'm making for our popular publicchatter.com corporate and securities law blog. And I'm very excited to talk about generative AI. The future is here. And with me will be Jason Barnwell, an MIT engineer who, for some reason, went to law school. And he currently serves as general manager for digital transformation of corporate, external, and legal affairs at Microsoft. This is going to be a humdinger today on publicchatter.com. All right, Jason, generative AI has been my experience being in the legal field. And I know you have a background as an engineer, and then you went to law school later. My two boys are software engineers, and the only advice I think I've given them is to never go to law school. So I didn't get to you in time. But lawyers tend to be behind the curve. And so I think when a lot of lawyers, I remember even when the internet came around, at the time I was working at the SEC, and a number of the old timers retired pretty fast when they started being required to do things on the internet. So this could be another technology that pushes people out because, as we'll talk about, I do think it's going to have a disproportionate impact actually on the legal profession compared to the rest of society. But it is, in my opinion, a societal change. But what's your opinion? Why, how is generative AI being used today? Why are we even taping this?
Well, I come at this from a slightly different perspective, which is, so I was a securities lawyer and a corporate lawyer. That's how I started my practice when I was in private practice coming out of law school. And I look at all the drudgery that was part of my work. I remember doing things like, okay, I'm going to do a confidential treatment request. So I'm going to read this document, and I'm going to redact these pieces and provide justification. And there was some thinking behind it, but after I did, the umpteenth one, I was like, this may not be my highest best purpose. And so I come at this from the direction of, we go and we get this amazing training, the ability to engage in such advanced critical thinking, to really explore the why of things, to get to the really working from policy down to implementation. And then we end up going out into practice, and we end up staying in the weeds and deploying our cognition, which is going to be the scarcest resource we have, our human cognition, time, and attention. And we deploy that to these things that are not our highest best purpose. So I embrace the truth of what you're saying, that for many people, the future is going to be uncomfortable because it's going to be different than it has looked in the past. But I am incredibly excited to get stuff off my desk, which the first few times were interesting, but now I'd rather instruct a machine on how to pre-process that for me to be my co-pilot, and then let me review the work and polish it up and clean it. I think that's a practice I want to build. So that's where I come from on this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I keep hearing that we're at the top of the hype cycle for this. And to me, we're nowhere near the top. I just met a judge actually at a cocktail party, and he had not even heard of generative AI.
So
that's
that is,
believable. I think there's some people out there right now that still even haven't heard of it, much less tried it. And it is free to use, and there's many different tools, including Microsoft's Bing. And so I urge all of you out there, if you haven't tried it, it is so easy to get an account. You don't have to give away your life. You want to start doing this because this is like email. This is like the internet. This is going to be, especially if you're in the legal profession, a regular part of your practice.
I think it is completely debatable and interesting. Where are we on the hype cycle? And the thing I would offer as perspective is this: whatever experiences people are having with these tools now, they're only going to get easier, better, and more powerful. So whatever is available now, this is the worst it'll ever be from a capabilities and capacity standpoint. It's only going to get better. So I think it is wise to examine, like, where are we on the hype cycle, because that feeds perception. But from things coming into market, like, it's going to get really cool. and it's already happening. And hopefully you and I will take a peek at a few things today and maybe give people a taste of what's out there.
Oh, we definitely will. If you haven't learned much about this, I would urge you to go to a podcast called Freakonomics Radio. They just concluded on September 6th a 3-part podcast entitled How to Think a Bit About AI. So between the 3 episodes, you really learn a lot. The first episode was Can AI Take a Joke? So in essence, it was about whether does AI replace writing entirely? The second episode was about new technologies always scare us. Is AI any different? You and I are about to talk about that. And then the third episode, and if you only listen to one of the 3 podcasts, this is the one I would listen to, is about AI is changing everything. Does that include you? That really, I think that podcast in itself would bring you up to speed. But there's lots of other podcasts out there. There's one by Tony Wan that his podcasts tend to be pretty short, 20, 30 minutes. And his are really, he comes out with one about every 3 weeks, and he gets deep into them. So his most recent one was called Power Prompts. Prompts is the term for, like, if you do a search on a search engine, you do a search. When you do a search on generative AI, it's called a prompt, and that's getting good at doing prompts is what this is all about, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so unlike a search where you just put in a term and you click a button, a prompt is actually more of a discussion. You could think of generative AI as sort of your colleague, your brainstorming partner, because you go back and forth with it to further refine, give context to it, to what you're seeking.
You used the magic word.
Ooh.
You used the magic word. You used the perfect word that people need to start embracing: context. So this is going to bear out in, I think, our conversation, but it's probably good to get it out early and in front. So one of the easiest ways to think about these tools is they start off with a very kind of raw set of capabilities for generating outputs. And we'll make this more concrete in a moment. But one of the most important things that the human does is they set the context for what the objective is. It is the human's job to start literally defining, here are the kind of the boundaries around how you should process this. This is the format of the output that I would like. This is information that I would like you to take into account as you are generating a response to this. And you nailed it with the word context, because really what you're doing is you're constructing the context that these models use to do the work. And it is going to be in the purview of humans for probably some long period of time to both do the goal seeking, to understand what are we trying to accomplish, why does this matter, and to also to be the curator and the constructor of context that is appropriate to actually action on whatever you're trying to do. And that is something that's uniquely, that's what's special about us humans, is we really do have the ability to not just do the goal seeking and understand why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? But we can also span across domains and pull together the right information to feed in as context for these tools. And that is going to be an increasingly valuable capability and a skill set. And so I think you nailed it when you used the word context. And I just wanted to reinforce that, because I think it's really important as a mental model for what you're doing as you're engaging with these tools.
And that's why you need to start now, is because it's a skill set that you're gonna have to develop. It's different than doing a search, a lot different. And you're only going to get better when you learn about it, read about it, how to provide the right context, like that podcast I just mentioned with Tony Wayne, when he gives, his tips. Well, let's talk about why people might be scared of AI in general, just to get that tackled. And that's not the purpose of this video. We are going to go talk about practical application to the law, but a lot of people are scared of AI in general, and there's a good reason for that. And I don't know what, one of the podcasts I heard that I listened to talked about the ability for individuals to develop potentially biological weapons, which right now, like a nation state would need the resources to build something like that, but potentially with the knowledge, the wisdom, well, not wisdom, but the knowledge that's collected by AI, which is, they use LLM, large language models, to do that. So that's pretty scary. biological weapons by a terrorist.
That is scary. I think the fear in many instances comes from a more basic human reaction, which is, I don't understand this. This is foreign to me. It's new. I don't really understand how it works under the hood. I may not have actually played around with it, and so it's a thing that somebody's been telling me about, but I haven't actually gone and used it, and so it's still an abstract notion for me. So, and I'm not hand waving away all of the risks that are that come with any kind of enabling technology, right? So the head of our organization, he wrote a book on this called Tools and Weapons, and it really gets to the point of, whenever a new capability arises, it can be used for great good, and it can be used by bad actors for negative outcomes. And ultimately, what we end up having to decide as a society is, what do we want to be? What are the outcomes that we want? What matters to us? And then we can start creating governance around that accomplishes those goals. But I think the biggest source of fear for most people is way more, it's closer to earth. It is, how's this going to impact my employment? How does this impact my opportunities in life? And that's very normal and natural, and there's nothing more human than that. And of course, the best way to really take advantage of the wave that's coming is to start engaging these capabilities and start thinking about, how can I start integrating this into making my life better? And I think if people do that, if they take that step of going from kind of just 0 to 1, you don't have to go to 10, but just go from 0 to 1, you'll start realizing very quickly, this is incredibly helpful. And so, yes, it is absolutely necessary for us to figure out as a society how we are going to cabin the risks that you mentioned. But the upside and the potential is so massive. And so the thing I would offer is exactly what you already recommended, which is, for people who have some fear about this, go play around and see what's actually going on. And I suspect most of the people who do that will come away seeing more of the promise and a bit less of the peril attached.
Yeah, there's a Wharton professor, Ethan Malik, who does a Substack called One Useful Thing. And in March 8th, his weekly newsletter was about secret cyborgs, the present disruption, in 3 papers. And in his Substack is about generative AI. And he talks about the productivity. They studies have been done now and show that you can have a 30 to 50% increase in your productivity. And like you started out doing those confidential treatment requests, if you can get those done a lot easier and quicker, your quality of life probably will go up, and you'll be able to spend more time doing work that probably makes you feel more fulfilled. And so, yeah, it does. I'm old enough for, again, it reminds me of the internet. People were so scared to buy anything online, to provide any personal information online for a real long period of time. And it was eBay that really sort of opened the door to people starting to feel comfortable even buying something online. And of course, now almost everybody does. Let's talk about the impact of this technology on the legal industry in general. I already had mentioned that it would be disproportionate, because I think initially people thought, since it does handle repetitive tasks, that the jobs that would be most impacted would be not the white collar ones. It would be like telemarketing. But the studies are showing that I've read that it is actually some of the white collar professions that might be impacted the most, including the legal profession. What do you think?
I think that there's something important for people in the legal profession to observe about what is happening right now, which is these models, many of the models, and now they're going multimodal, which we can talk about or not. They work on words, and that has been the purview of legal professionals for a really long time. And if we're honest, I think it's why a lot of the advancements in productivity that we've sought have been very hard to land, because in many instances, what you were trying to do was to effectively take some kind of amorphous process, however you might describe it, that was not well structured. It often didn't have like a clean taxonomy. It didn't have some of the features that we would see in something like software engineering, where it's a very prescriptive and precise taxonomy. It's very structured. We use these streams of words which encode meaning. And so it was very hard to start integrating these technologies into those workflows, because how are you going to access the email stream and do something useful on top of that? Well, so what's interesting is now we can, right? You literally have an assistant that you can start throwing fairly messy it's bulk amounts of words into, and it can try to process that into a clean signal that it can act on, that it can start helping you do things with. And we should expect that this can be disruptive to how we work, because just think about how much of your time is functionally, are you answering the same question again? Because somebody needs an answer, but it had to be you who gave the answer again and again and again and again. And now we can get into a mode where we start thinking about what is the best answer to this holistically. And maybe even like developing it as almost like a policy assertion. And then can we start giving people really good answers at scale that then gives us time back to kind of move up the stack and really start paying attention to more of the signals in the world that you would want to bring together to provide better answers and better guidance to our clients. So I'm rambling a little bit now, but I would say yes, we should expect that these new capabilities are going to create some changes in how we work, because they meet us where we are. They operate in the language layer, and they effectively turn that into almost like an API that can be accessed by machines to help us. But the good news is we are drowning in work. And so I don't, everybody I talk to is like, they're all like, I'm so busy. I cannot keep up with my docket, my desk, whatever kind of thing you want to call it. And so I'm heartened that we're actually going to be able to bring help. Like, help is coming. And for those who adopt these approaches and embrace them sooner, I think they're going to have way more interesting jobs. Because one of the interesting things that happens is as technology gets better and capabilities get better, people's expectations increase. So in the past, your clients would have expected a certain level of capability and quality of service. And let's be real honest, clients are incredibly demanding. And once you start enabling yourself with these capabilities, I don't think the amount of work is going to go down. I think it's going to get more refined. People are going to expect, so one of the things that I offer to people when they're like, hey, so how should I think about being outside counsel? One of the things I reflect upon is one of the most valuable things that outside counsel can give me are the 3 sentences that I copy and paste in an email that can then work internally. Like it's being a little bit reductive, but that's the refined form of understanding our business, what we're trying to accomplish, and being able to put yourself into the mindset that we have and empathize with what we're trying to accomplish, and then give me such refined product that I can just put it into our work stream directly without having to do a bunch of machining on that. And I think one of the things that gets in the way of that is, especially, and I'll say this for outside counsel attorneys and legal professionals, are expected to engage in such a high degree of excellence at all times that it's incredibly hard to refine the work to the extent that you often want to, because you're having to do extreme coverage across all of the facts and information. And it literally doesn't leave you enough time to refine the output. So what ends up happening is the 3-page memo rather than the 3-sentence response. So that is a very long way of saying, my prediction of this is not that there will be less work, there will be more work. And the work that is available will probably be more interesting and access higher parts of our brain, but that we should expect that these capabilities that are lighting up are going to ask us to engage differently in how we do the work and to get out of the weeds and start thinking about taking all those implicit practices and processes that we apply sequentially to do our work, and actually turn that into a declared context that one of these machines can help us with, so that we can start scaling across all the coverage you need to be fully diligent, but then also turns into a refined input that I use as a legal professional to give the counseling advice that actually is impactful, because it is easy for people to understand. It takes into account all the relevant facts, and it is basically in the native language of the people who are going to absorb it. And if I can spend more of my time doing that, I'm creating extreme value for my client. And I think that is what's on offer for us.
Yeah, I mean, you can take a 3-page memo actually that you get and put it into Bing Chat and say, please reduce this to 3 bullets. And that's something that generative AI can do for you. I'm excited because one of my pet peeves is that a lot of law firm memos are written in a very staid style that doesn't feel human. So you can actually take one of those and say, and put it into AI and say, please make this read like a human would write it.
So the memos are written to basically demonstrate I did a good job, not always to answer the question in the way that's easiest to absorb. And I 100% agree.
Let me do a quick rundown of a lawyer's ethical obligations. Just because this is a new technology, you have a duty to be competent. And so I think that will include being technically competent. So at some point, being knowledgeable about generative AI is going to be expected of you by your clients, whether you're in-house or in a law firm. Communication, if you're in a law firm, are you informing your client that generative AI was used as part of your research? At some point, I think your clients might be demanding it at some point, but at some point, there's a possibility right now that some clients don't want you to use it. Confidential, if you're using open source AI, you do not want to input confidential information into that AI, because then you are leaking that information. It is out there now as part of the database, the LLM. But there are legal vendors that do have AI capabilities that have security in place where you couldn't put in confidential information. And obviously you want to test drive and ensure that those work well. And then fees, you can't bill for time. You can't pretend that you didn't use generative AI and say it took me 10 hours to do this confidential treatment request, when really it only took you a half hour because you used one of these tools. Let's go ahead and do the exciting demo. How can we securities lawyers use this? What's one of the possibilities?
All right, let's do it. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully it's showing up. So I want us to get a little bit weird, and so I'm gonna try to build up to the weirder stuff. So we're gonna start off with things that hopefully people are fairly. I suspect many of your audience they've already played with, but then we're just gonna keep turning up the temperature of weird. And so your job, Brock, is to ask questions when you're like, Jason, that doesn't make any sense. What is that? What are you doing there? And so just interrupt me at all times. So let's start off with the consumer end. And you just offered some, I think, good kind of just markers of like, hey, whenever you're in a consumer product, just think about where the data goes and just be mindful of it and understand it. And choose accordingly. So let's start off with ChatGPT, which is, as you mentioned, is available to everyone. So anybody can go sign up for ChatGPT. The interface looks like this. I may make this a little bit larger so that when it records, people can see it. So what could we do with this? Well, let's imagine that we're a securities lawyer, and what we're doing is we're scanning the proposed rules that are coming through. Because our client, they have specific sensitivities. And so we're constantly lurking the register to see like what is on the horizon. So let's grab the text of a proposed rule. So I'm not taking the entire, and just so we don't think that I'm doing some crazy Wizard of Oz stuff, This is the full text. Anybody can go get it. It's out there, all 76 pages. For our convenience and to deal with the constraint of the model I'm using, I'm just grabbing the first few pages of it. So I've already done that, and I've got the text right here. And I can go into ChatGPT, and I can start giving it prompts that let me do useful things. So let me go back to my cheat sheet here. So, okay. So here we go. There we go. Yeah. So I've got a few prompts here that I've been messing around with. So I go in and I put in a prompt like this, and I'm going to now replace the text. As you can tell, I'm not a technical demo expert, Brock. So you're getting kind of the so-so version. So let's see what happens. Okay, so this is pretty handy in as much as like it's pulling out some information for me, and you can do other fun stuff with it, right? So, and I realize we're just doing some basic, having some fun here, nothing too serious. Okay, format this as a table. Okay, so now it's getting easier, and like, but these are the kinds of things you can do to manipulate the outputs of these. Pretty handy. All right, let's see what other things we might do. Okay, as you mentioned summarization. Okay, so I don't have time to read all of that, right? Because I'm running to a meeting, what have you. Okay, that's actually pretty good from like for just a few sentences to give me the gestalt of what's going on there. That's pretty handy. I like it. Okay, well, so one of the things that you mentioned is that climate change is hot, pun intended. And so maybe I'm trying to focus my attention, and there's certain topics that I want to understand. Like, is this related to topics that I might enumerate? So climate change is one. Okay, so the answer is, it seems like probably not. So these are, some useful kind of basic things that you can play around with. But let's go back to that concept that you had of context, of creating context for the model to work on. So now I've gone a little bit further, and I've created something that's a little bit more robust to change the context for this model. And specifically, I'm trying to get it to start taking on specific characteristics of the things that I care about. So here the part that I've copied, or I'm about to copy, you can see I've put some of the policy priorities that my organization might care about, and I'm going to try to now get this thing to start reflecting more of the things that we care about, so that shapes the responses that come back. So I will copy this, and it'll probably spit some things back at me when I do this. We're not too worried about this, but so it looks like it's mostly lining up with things that we care about. Now it's starting to add some other stuff that I don't know was in there. So that's where you have to be very mindful of like, And so it's good to just kind of understand, is that what I put in? Because I think that might go a little bit beyond what I did. But maybe not. Actually, this seems aligned. You know what? I'm wrong. I think this is actually fairly aligned with what I put in. So good job, robots. All right. So,
but I mean, I do want to make the point. Right now with ChatGPT 4, it supposedly has the brain of a squirrel. ChatGPT 2 had the brain of a honeybee, and so you don't want a squirrel to be responsible for your legal work, whatever you use ChatGPT or Bing or any of the other tools for. You always have to go and check the work.
Yes. Check the work.
You always got to check the work.
It's, which, by the way, is part of the ethical canon, right? Like, this is not new. None of this is new. Whatever tools you use, whoever assists you in your process, we're responsible. It's our bar card. Check the work. So now we can ask something that's a little bit wackier, right? Should we support this proposed rule? So let's throw it in, and let's see what comes back. So what we see is it's going through and it's trying to generate some analysis of, do we feel good about this? Do we not? Okay, so, and of course, like many good legal professionals, it gives a very hedgy response. But it says, I see alignment. It appears to support your objectives, particularly with certain things that you want. And so that's actually pretty good signal, because now you can go back through and you can test this for yourself. Like you can look at, well, is the reasoning that is projected out from these predictions sound? Does it align with kind of what I know and what I've researched? So this is a way to speed this up, right? And we can imagine that. So let's do a little bit of pretend. Let's imagine that you had many clients and you were perhaps at an outside counsel firm, and you were able to effectively coalesce their policy objectives into a fairly succinct set of statements. Imagine how cool your client bulletin could look if you were able to give what is effectively instantaneous analysis. Again, you have to check the work, but like this starts to become a tool for potentially great leverage, because you can customize the outputs for your specific clients. And that is the power that comes from this. And again, one of the coolest things about these tools is you're using language, which we're pretty good at, I think, to manipulate them. And that means that people can start using these capabilities now. But you highlighted a couple things. So let's go back to our cheat sheet. So ChatGPT, it's awesome. It is really a consumer grade tool, which does not, it is amazing. It is absolutely amazing, but there's a few constraints that come with it that are probably worth thinking about, and understanding that there are other tools, as you mentioned, that are out there, and specifically tools that are geared more towards enterprise scenarios where there's just different sensitivities that you need to take into account. So let's crack open Bing Chat. So this is Bing Chat Enterprise. So let's see. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. And one of the great things about, there's a couple things that are really nice about the enterprise version of this. One is it doesn't leak your information out into model training and other things. So that's wonderful. But one of the other things that's really cool about Bing Chat Enterprise is it has the ability to go retrieve information from the internet. So when you're dealing with ChatGPT, the information, the facts that are baked into that are constrained by what it could find when the model was constructed. It cannot go get subsequent information. And so I suspect many people have seen examples where you ask a question and it was accurate as of the time of the creation of the model, but then things have changed over time. So one of the really cool things about Bing Chat is it can do what's known as retrieval augmented generation. So RAG, as you may hear it referred to. And what it can do is take your prompt and then try to go find relevant content that's available to it, put it into the context window, and then try to generate an answer with the benefit of that updated information. And this is a little bit dangerous, but I'm gonna try to replicate some of what we did, but with a slightly, we'll see how this goes, Brock. I have not tested all this out, so this could be a little bit messy. So we can see that there is a rule called exemption for certain investment advisors operating through the internet. So that's just a name. And I'm going to, let's see, who should I make this a little bit bigger? Who should I talk to at the SEC about the proposed rule? And I'll throw it in quotes. Maybe that'll help. I don't know. All right. We cross our fingers. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Okay. So great.
We got hallucination.
Maybe.
A little bit.
Maybe. So one of the things is it has probably found the rule. There's a good chance. But let's see if we can tweak this a little bit. So this, I think this is probably accurate, right? It's pulling and it's actually giving it citations. So we can go interrogate this if we want to, but I am an incredibly...
Well, it's saying to contact the commissioner because she made a statement, but so you don't want to do that. You want to contact people that wrote the proposal.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do is this. Who are the SEC counsel listed as contacts for this rule, this proposed rule? And let's see if we get... So the other thing that, let's see.
Okay.
Well, I guess it's not going to help me.
But it's context. I think it's the word counsel.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
It would be almost, who are the SEC contacts? It would be.
Congratulations. We are now getting into the process of what is effectively prompt engineering, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. For further information, contact. So, okay. What are the names of the contacts listed for further information on this proposed rule? So this is the iterative process that you have to kind of go through because it's a little bit of an inductive process. Let's see. Hey, okay.
Hey.
So that may be the actual people. I don't know. I'm also it's possible that it pulled the correct rule, or maybe it didn't.
Yeah.
And we could interrogate that further, but for time, we're not going to do that. But this is the iterative process. This is what play looks like, which is like I wanted an answer. I didn't get quite what I wanted, and so you just keep tweaking it. But now you understand how to adjust your prompting so that you get the outcome that you want. I think I started talking over you, so I'm gonna...
No, but let's say your client is really into poetry or into the blues. You could say, can you turn that excerpt that you pulled out into a poem or into a blues
Absolutely
song? And you could do something fun for them, and that might be worth it in itself.
I would love the summary in the form of the Wu-Tang Clan, just putting it out there for folks. Like if you're ever sending me work product, maybe not the stuff for like, formal filing, but for the internal version, big fan. Okay, you ready to get a little bit weirder?
All right.
Let's do it. Okay. So what we've been playing with thus far when we've been looking at ChatGPT and Bing Chat are really the very kind of sculpted and curated, broadly based available products that for honest, like what normal people will use because they work well. But under the hood, there's really interesting stuff. So let's get a little bit weird. So I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet. All right, Azure. So Azure is Microsoft's cloud stack, and it has so much capability that's in there. So what we're looking at now is the Azure Open AI Studio, and most of your the three people who are now left watching this, because I think I've bored people out of their minds. This is not something you're typically going to see, but there's probably somebody in your organization who has access to this and can do interesting, fun, and special things for you. So let's go to the playground. We're going to crack open chat. So what we see here is the ability to go in and make adjustments to, you can choose different models. You can play around with the parameters, all the things. We're not going to mess around with that too much. But one of the really, really interesting things I think of this experience is you can go in and you can change what's called the system message. So one of the terms that people may start hearing are things like meta prompts and other things. And what that is the ability to start changing, and I don't want to anthropomorphize these things too much, but I'm going to use it for the sake of time. it's basically allows you to create the baseline context and to some extent the persona that is driving the model output generation. So I'm going to make this more concrete in a second. So we saw here that we created what is effectively this persona, right? You're an assistant to a policy analyst for an investment company that serves retail investors, yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to drop that into, and that did not copy. That's weird. Once more with feeling. Okay, great. And just for a little bit of readability, we'll break these out. Okay, so this is now the context that is sitting behind all of the prompts that we put into this chat session. So I don't, so the cool thing is if this is now and I think I have to save that. So now I don't have to explicitly say like, you're an investment analyst, or these are my my policy priorities. That's just baked into everything that is there. So for example, I can now, if that's baked into the model, I can go in and I can do something like, here we'll go back and we'll, actually, I'm going to go back to the source. So I'm going to say, I'm going to take some of this content. I'm going to grab this one. Again, I copied it out of the, all right. Does the proposed rule that follows, I'll make this a little bit bigger. And so it's a little bit easier to see, I'm gonna remove some of this other stuff that is not going to be quite so relevant. So I'm going to get rid of that. So it's a little less busy. Does the proposed rule that follows align with our policy priorities? And then I think I had a typo. Should I fix the typo? Yes, I'll fix the typo. Okay. Okay. So it gives a pretty decent assertion, and now we can start getting into some of the other, again, the things that you can do all the things that we talked about before. Is this related to climate change, or what? You can do all the things that, yes, and then it gives the explanations, all that good stuff. So this allows you to go in and start really customizing the outputs of your robots, right? So you can literally start standing these up for your internal scenarios. You can bake in that context, and you can go around and play with all the parameters. You can take so for example, one of the parameters that you'll hear people talk about is temperature, and temperature is the amount of randomness that gets injected in the outputs. And basically, the colder it is, the more clinical it is. The higher it is, it goes from 0 to 1. The higher it is, the more creative and fanciful. You would think like, oh, I want 0. Actually, no. If you go 0, it tends to get more repetitious on itself. You want the right level of randomness to get the outcomes, which is one of those counterintuitive things. You can also see tokens and other fun stuff here. But Brock, I see a problem. This has been involving an incredible amount of copy and paste by Jason. Have you noticed that?
It's like a confidential treatment request, yeah.
Oh, I wonder if we could do something a little bit different. And this is where it's going to get a little bit weird. All right. So let's see something else, and hopefully we don't lose people in the process. So I'm going to open up. So actually, let's back up. And unfortunately, the taskbar is obscuring some of the things I need to see up there. So I'm going to have to move this around, and I apologize for that. So SEC website has an RS feed of all the proposed rules. So let's imagine that we are an overtaxed associate who's been asked to go process all of these because we want to like learn, like, is this relevant for our client? Sending me through a day-long exercise of cracking each of these open, copying and pasting content, putting prompts in, like that, Brock, that's not what we signed up for, right? That's not what we want. Well, guess what? We can automate these processes of, after we refine the prompting, there is something called Azure Prompt Flow, which we're going to crack open and take a look at right now. And I realize this is a very busy screen, and I want to just conceptually start off with an overview of what this is. All right. What this is a way to orchestrate inputs through large language models and other generative AI models, and to basically turn that into a flow that you can use again and again and again. So whereas before you saw us taking a snippet, putting in a prompt, getting what came out of that, so forth and so on, what this lets you do is to effectively turn that into a systematic process where you can put your inputs in the top and it just runs, and then it collects all your outputs. So let's take a look at this. So inputs. So here I'm limiting the number of characters. Don't worry too much about that. But the most important thing you see here is the URL of the proposed rule. So literally it's going to, all it's asking for is a PDF, a URL for the PDF of whatever the source is. And we can see that the outputs include all kinds of things like the comment due date, policy recommendations, SEC contacts, is it about climate change, policy position, so forth and so on. And the way this works is, and I'm not going to go too crazy on this because I don't think your audience cares that deeply, but what it lets you do is establish things like, hey, what is that default context that I want to run through all of this? And now that's established once, and I can keep reusing that, right? So I don't have to keep copying and pasting that and doing all that nonsense. And then this is just a helper that I have that basically goes and gets the text of the proposed rule. But here's where we see a little bit of the magic. So one of the things that I saw in there was I want the title of the rule coming from the source document because I want the truth. And we can see here, I'm using that default system prompt that we talked about, like, hey, I'm an AI policy analyst, yada, yada, yada. But we can see here that we've actually given it an instruction, which is basically find me the title for this thing. The title is probably between these words and these words. It turns out this works incredibly well. This is very accurate. It's a lot like instructing your intern, go read this, go find me the title. It's probably between these words, and it looks something like this. Okay, great. Well, that's nice. Okay, as you said, like summarization. Okay, so now I can get a very crisp summary. And by the way, you mentioned Ethan Malik. That dude's doing really cool stuff. I recommend people go read his content. One of the concepts that he introduced is this chain of density, where it basically starts using iterative approaches to keep refining the summarization. That is an example of a technique that you can start injecting into these kinds of prompts to get even better outcomes. And the cool thing is, once you build that into one of the like a flow like this, it gets reused, and so it gets better and better. Comments required by date. Again, a tedious thing, but easily done now with this. I just use a few words. Great, it pulls it out for me. Are we likely to support the rule? Okay, this is pretty handy, right? Because now I'm starting to get some sense of like, how do we feel about this? Classify the policy position, like do we support it, oppose it, or additional analysis? And then but imagine if I'm gonna have to move this a little bit to get it out of here. Imagine if I could create an automation that ran over all of the currently proposed SEC rules published through their RSS feed. So that's what this is. What it does is it goes and it finds it gets all the proposed rules and it runs them through that flow that I just showed you. So it gets all the proposed rules from the RSS feed, right? And then it does a bunch of glue stuff that you don't need to worry about. But then ultimately what it does is it calls that flow that I just created. It calls that flow and it outputs all of it to a handy dandy SharePoint list. So imagine if you had to dispatch an army of associates to go read all the stuff, get the information. And so I was able to basically have this run in the background. And I had like, and I'm not saying this is perfect, but as a first cut analysis, it's pretty good. And I think it ran in like a half an hour and I had all the stuff.
Yeah, and you could apply for people that are in-house if you're looking at peer group companies and you want to compare proxy statements or any of that. I mean, there's just unlimited potential for this kind of a tool.
You've left me speechless.
Yeah, I mean, the Edgar database is something that there's been a number of companies that, we've all been paying for, and they're enhancing their tools, I'm sure, with AI right now, but people are going to be creating their own.
I think that's right. And the one of the cool things is, so products are wonderful. And the people who make enterprise products that do specific and bespoke things on, for example, Edgar, like I think there's going to be a place for them forever, because let's be honest, there's only so many people who want to roll up their sleeves and do some of this stuff. But my point is you can. And if you have a scenario that's very impactful for your organization, it takes far less technical wherewithal and investment than people realize to actually stand up something and get it going. So when you reached out and you're like, hey, I want to have a chat about this, I was like, I wonder how long it would take me to stumble through and actually make something that could like do something kind of interesting for us to talk about. And it's part of my job is to do that. So let's be honest. It's also fun and I enjoy it. But in about 2 hours, I had like a working scaffold of all that was running. And now, because I've got the ability to go back in to this flow and make changes, I can add elements really fast. So and we're not going to, I was almost tempted to try to do this in real time, but I realized that's courting disaster. But if you gave me a question, I suspect I could have it in production in 10-ish minutes, 15 minutes. Like that's the kind of iteration speed that we're getting now, because I can literally go in, make changes, push this magic deploy button, do a few other things, but really just push deploy. And now all of a sudden I have a live model running that now my workflow is operating against.
Yeah, and it's really mind-blowing. And you don't have to be an MIT engineer to do all this. I mean, the tools have been built by the MIT engineers. Really incredible stuff, Jason. I can't thank you enough for showing off. I mean, it might even scare some people off the first half of this program. Just do the baby steps. That's where you need to start. And then one day you'll grow up to be a Jason, maybe.
Well, look, I think I'm more regressive than anything. I think I've devolved. But to your point, if you start with the things that are available and you figure out, oh, this could be really helpful for something that I have to do a lot and that could be very valuable, impactful, and meaningful, it's not that hard to find a technologist who can help you scaffold out a prototype pretty quickly, put something into production, see if it works, and then build from there. Because again, the job of the legal professional is not necessarily to become a full stack developer or any of that stuff. The job is really being curious about what's coming online, how can I put it to work, and then working with the other professionals in your organization to figure out how you actually build experiences that take advantage of this. And so I think you're right to like kind of put us back and like, hey, don't be scared. Your job is to play with the first few things and then get like curious, interested, and start thinking about scenarios that are valuable, and then find the right people in your org to help you kind of build out those other kind of more advanced and weird things. So I think that's great guidance.
And the other point I would make is this is not a fad. This is not like virtual reality that was a hot thing 2 years ago that one day will probably be hot again, but this is completely different. This is a real game changer, particularly for our industry. Can't thank you enough for your time, Jason. Awesome stuff.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Brock.
Have a good day.